Hi everyone, and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
So today we're going to be talking about something that many people do for fun in their spare time. What kind of things do you do in your spare time?
Oh, in my spare time, well, I like to play video games.
You do?
I was just talking about video games today to a friend. Yeah, video games are a good way to spend time. Sometimes I spend too much time. I play those games where you kind of say, oh, I'll just play another 10 minutes, and then 2 or 3 hours disappears. So I like to do that. Reading books.
Sure.
I'm a big book reader too, and sometimes I read books and they make me want to play video games.
Okay.
So sometimes they work together. But I do battles sometimes because I'm reading a good book and I'm playing a good video game, and there's only so much free time.
That is
But that's kind of a good thing, so I'm never bored.
No,
so how about you?
I do not have any free time.
Aww.
I'm a parent. It's not my free time, it's his free time now.
So you spend it playing with your son.
Exactly.
Well,
we just got him swimming stuff so I can take him to the swimming pool.
Soon he'll be old enough to play video games.
That's right. Yeah. When I was younger, of course, I did have a lot more spare time.
Right.
I did play quite a lot of video games. I like a good RPG game that you can really get into and spend a long time on.
Yeah, those are good, but sometimes you do end up spending too much time. So today we're going to be looking at some video games.
Right.
Maybe some of the classic games we played, maybe some games you've only heard about and, can kind of discover because video games have been around a long time now.
That's right. We're looking at some of the oldest ones in today's article. Let's read about them.
Reading.
Fun facts. A classic video game is turning 40 this year. Pac-Man was created in 1980 by Toru Iwatani of the Japanese video game company Namco. In the game, players earn points by guiding Pac-Man through a maze while he eats dots. The small yellow figure also must avoid his enemies, colorful ghosts named Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde. In 1980, most video arcade games were violent and appealed to boys and men. Namco came up with Pac-Man as a game that girls and women could enjoy too. Pac-Man's shape was inspired by a pizza that was missing a slice and looked like a mouth. Pac-Man's shape was also based on the written Japanese character for mouth, but Iwatani made it round and cute. Pac-Man's name came from the Japanese word paku paku, the sound of a mouth opening and closing. People loved the fun of solving Pac-Man's maze. The game was a hit, and it still is today.
So the article starts by kind of picking why we've chosen to write this article about this particular game. It says a classic video game is turning 40 this year. That means it's 40 years old. It's the video game's 40th birthday.
That is amazing. Yeah, so let's find out about this middle-aged video game. It's 40 years old. We might say a person is middle-aged, a middle-aged video game. That's weird. But let's find out which game we're talking about. Pac-Man! Yes, wagga wagga wagga. Pac-Man was created in 1980 by Toru Iwatani of the Japanese video game company Namco, which of course are still around today.
Yep, they're still making games. So, what was going on in this game? Well, I'm sure you know if you've seen this game played, or maybe you've played it yourself. In the game, players earn points by guiding Pac-Man through a maze while he eats dots. Yeah, just very simple dots. Now here we said you guide Pac-Man through a maze, and that means to help someone get from one side of something to another, or you can guide someone through something by helping them solve a difficult problem or exercise, or maybe complete a hard activity. Now the key word is guide. To guide someone, you're showing that person what to do or where to go, and you're giving them the benefit of your knowledge and experience. Of course, Pac-Man can't see the whole maze. You can, so you can guide him through it by pressing the buttons. Someone could guide you through a museum if they worked there and knew all about it. That would be another example. Here, we're talking about guiding him through a maze.
Yes, and what is a maze? A maze is sort of like something that we might build or something you could draw and look at, but the idea of a maze is it's a very complicated network of streets or paths. Often we have walls in a maze, so you can't really see very far, and it's a bit of a puzzle. You're kind of stuck inside, and there's a lot of left, rights, straights, choices to make, turns to choose, and often dead ends where you can't go through, so you have to go back. And the puzzle part, what you're trying to do is get out of the maze. You might be in one yourself, in which case you can't go anywhere until you find your way out of the maze. Or if it's a maze in a book, on paper, or in a video game, you might win the game by getting out of the maze. So it can be kind of fun, a little confusing, and it's mostly for enjoying yourself as you try to figure out the answer, figure out how to get free or get out of the maze.
So in the article, we use this grammar pattern, while. We said you guide Pac-Man through the maze while he eats dots. And while is used to mean that two things are going on at the same time. A is happening at the same time as B. They're both going on at once. So A, Pac-Man is going through the maze. B, as he does this, he eats dots. We can combine those two ideas with while. In this case of Pac-Man's maze, you don't win the maze by getting Pac-Man out, you win it by getting all the dots and eating all the dots. Here's another example of how we can combine two activities that are going on at the same time with while. While Eric was watching TV, his sister sat on the sofa and read her book. So going through a maze, eating dots, it could be fun for a bit, but what makes this game exciting?
It's true, the maze isn't that complicated. The dots are all lined up everywhere. They're not hard to find and eat. So what is the challenge? What makes it difficult? The small yellow figure, that's Pac-Man, who looks kind of like a pizza with a piece missing. The small yellow figure also must avoid his enemies. Colorful ghosts named Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde. That's right, these are the bad guys of the game. You see their names there, and they're chasing around Pac-Man, or of course the figure of Pac-Man, as you guide him through the maze, eating the dots. And I think as you play, the ghosts go faster and faster, making it easier and easier for them to catch your figure or catch the little Pac-Man guy. Let's look at this word figure. Yeah, it's one of the words we need to focus on, because we use figures often in video games to represent you, the player. But basically, a figure is any picture generally in the shape or form of a person. All right, so we can look at a figure maybe in a bathroom. If you want to know which is the men's room or which is the women's room, you look for the figures that look a little different. Usually the man looks like he's wearing pants, the woman looks like she's wearing a dress or a skirt. It doesn't have to be a picture of a person, an accurate picture with all the eyes and face and hair and features of the person, just the general shape to give you the general idea of something, usually done with a painting or a drawing of some kind. Here's another one, another type of figure that we see all the time. It says, we cross the street when we see a green figure of a walking person. That's how you know it's safe to cross.
Exactly. Now, these ghosts are not safe for Pac-Man, so he needs to avoid them. To avoid something is to stay away from that thing. You either don't go anywhere near it, or you find a way to go around it. You just stay away and make sure that that thing, usually something bad, can't affect you. You might say we could take this road to avoid the bad traffic. traffic. We know this road is always busy. We'll go a different way to avoid it. Here's another important piece of advice with this word. Try to avoid the wasp nest in that tree. Yeah, if you bother the wasps or even get too near, they will sting you a lot.
Absolutely. Stay away. Now, Pac-Man has an interesting story again. It's 40 years ago, and this was the very beginning of the video game era, the video game craze. It says, in 1980, most video arcade games were violent and appealed to boys and men. Yeah, it was a different time. Mostly men, boys would play video games, and most of the video games at that time involved shooting or fighting or something like that. Things that other people, women especially maybe, would consider to be violent. What is violent? This adjective means involving violence, involving hurting people physically, punching people, kicking them, stabbing them with knives, shooting them with guns, blowing them up with bombs. These are all violent actions. Okay, war is very violent. If you like violent movies, you like war movies, action movies, movies where people are fighting and people are getting hurt. It can be okay in entertainment for some people. It's not okay in real life, but even in entertainment, some people don't like violent things, all right? Because they involve hurting people physically. For example, although fencing is based on sword fighting, it's not a violent sport. People don't get cut or hurt or bleed. If it was a real sword fight, they would, but not in the sport of fencing. It's not very violent.
Right, so video games were violent, and that did seem to appeal to men and boys. So this word appeal is often used with the preposition to. We say something appeals to someone. You could say this thing really appeals to me. If something appeals to you, it attracts you. You like this idea, you think it sounds good, you think it sounds fun, you think it sounds enjoyable, so you want to do it. You could talk about bright colors in flowers appealing to insects. They see the bright colors, they go, that looks good, they fly over there. A book could appeal to you if it was about a subject you were interested in. A TV show could appeal to you if it had some of your favorite actors in. It would make you want to read that book or watch the TV show. And here's another example. The idea of a weekend at a spa really appealed to Reba. So all this fighting and shooting, I mean, I guess Namco thought we could make another fighting or shooting game.
Sure.
Or we can maybe take a different approach.
That's right. They also looked at all the people who weren't playing video games and tried to think of something that they might enjoy. So it says Namco came up with Pac-Man as a game that girls and women could enjoy too, and men who don't want to play violent games as well. Yeah, but they invented this, they created this, they thought of it before Namco made it. Pac-Man didn't exist. That's why we use this phrasal verb, to come up with. If you invent something, if you create something, if it pops out of your imagination and you're the first person to think of it, you come up with it. An artist will come up with a new idea for a painting, a writer will come up with a new story, and a musician, a songwriter, might come up with a new song. They didn't steal it from someone, they thought of it themselves. They invented it.
Right, and another thing that the people at Namco had to come up with was their character.
Sure.
Their hero. Who is going to be running around a maze? We could do a little figure of a boy or a man or something.
Could.
But they went with a different kind of idea, and we're going to talk about that now. The article says Pac-Man's shape was inspired by a pizza that was missing a slice and looked like a mouth, just as you mentioned earlier.
I didn't know that that was the idea. I just thought that's what it looked like.
Exactly what it looks like. No wonder it inspired the designer. If you inspire someone, you give that person an idea for something or the motivation to carry out a plan. Now we use be inspired by, and after the by, we put the source of the inspiration. This is the thing that gave you the idea or the feeling in the first place. So maybe a designer sees this pizza, a couple of slices missing, and goes, oh, that looks a cool kind of shape, and it looks the right kind of thing to eat dots. You know, they can go in its open mouth, so it all kind of comes together.
Interesting.
But that's not the only place they got inspiration, which is the noun from.
Yes, it says next, Pac-Man's shape was also based on the written Japanese character for mouth. So there's a character for mouth, but this was part of the idea. Also, it looked like a pizza, but we read Iwatani made it round and cute. Yes, the Japanese character for mouth is more of a square shape, but the creator decided to change that a little bit, make it look like more like a circle, and also have it look like a pizza.
Yeah, of course, the character is the same in Chinese as well.
It is. That's right.
But this is what the whole shape of Pac-Man was going to be based on.
Right, so it was based on the character for the word mouth in Japanese and in Chinese. If something is based on something, this shows us that this thing was used as a model, as an inspiration. It inspired another thing, all right? So you copy it a little bit, you borrow from it a little bit, you take some ideas from it a little bit, but just a little bit, and then you build it into something quite new, quite different, that can stand on its own. But there was like a seed of an idea if it was based on something else.
All right, so, and as we just said, the shape of Pac-Man, apart from being based on a pizza with a slice missing, was based on the Japanese character for mouth. Now, when we use character, we're talking about a symbol that is used in writing. Now, this could be something like one of the 26 letters of the English alphabet. It could also be the other symbols you might see, like the percent symbol, the and symbol, things like adding or times for math. So those are all characters, as are all the written words in Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and the various other languages that don't use the Latin, or sorry, Arabic alphabet. Okay, so those are what we mean by characters. If you pick up a newspaper here, you will see it's all written in many characters. I can read some of these characters, but not all of them. I think you need maybe to know 2000 to read a newspaper, I've heard. So that would mean I need to know and recognize 2000 different Chinese words. Okay. Here's an example sentence for using the word character in this way. Japanese uses many of the same characters as Chinese. Now, of course, there is another way to talk about characters, which is the person that appears in a game or something like that. So, of course, we can say Pac-Man is a video game character based on a Japanese character word.
That's true.
There
Absolutely
we go.
It is. Yeah, it's a person in a story, a character based on a character, a letter from the Japanese written language. And what about the name Pac-Man?
Good question.
Where did that come from? It is kind of unusual. Well, find out by reading the next sentence. Pac-Man's name came from the Japanese word paku paku, the sound of a mouth opening and closing. Paku paku paku. Okay, very, very interesting. So paku paku is sort of what Japanese people or parents, if they're feeding their kids, you know, open your mouth, they might say paku paku. And this is the sound in their language that they would sort of imagine saying to make the sound of opening and closing your mouth. Paku, Pac-Man, he's the guy who runs around eating stuff.
So that is Pac-Man, and this game took an interesting new approach. Instead of just shooting and fighting, Namco decided to do something a little different. Would it work? Yes, it did. And we see that it kind of broke new ground in a couple of other ways as well. So the article says that people loved the fun of solving Pac-Man's maze.
What is to solve? To solve, this verb basically just means to find the answer to a question or a problem or a puzzle, to figure it out. If your teacher gives you a math test with 10 questions on it, you have to solve those 10 questions. If someone asks you a riddle or a puzzle that you have to kind of use your brain and logic to find the answer, I know the answer. You've solved the puzzle. You found the answer to a problem or a puzzle or something like that. For example, Oh, this is a question I asked many times in school. Can you help me solve this math problem? Why does x equal 7? I don't know.
That is a difficult problem to solve.
Anything with x or y, I don't know.
Here, of course, solving the maze for Pac-Man would mean eating all the dots in the maze before any of the ghosts catch him.
Yes.
And if you solve that maze, you go on to the next maze, and it just gets more and more difficult.
Faster and faster.
The mazes get harder until you just kind of explode because it's too difficult to finish.
And you spend a lot of money playing that game back in the old days.
So next in the article, we read that the game was a hit and it still is today. Now, when we use this word hit as a noun, we're talking about something that is very popular or successful. A movie can be a hit. You can talk about a singer having a hit song. Things like that. These are very popular, they make a lot of money, they get to the top of the charts. It's a hit. Okay, well, we're going to stop there for the moment. We've got another great game to talk about tomorrow. Right now, we're going to go to today's For You chat question.
For You chat.
So today's question is, what's your favorite video game and why?
Wow.
A lot of choice there.
Yeah, 40 years, 40 plus years of choice.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Pick one.
Well, I'm a big fan. I said I like to read. I like history. So I'm a big fan of the Assassin's Creed games.
Okay.
These are ones where you're kind of a sneaky killer. But what I really like is each game takes place in a different period of history.
Cool.
So you're kind of in Rome around the time of Leonardo da Vinci. You can be a pirate in the 1700s.
Fun.
You're in Paris during the Revolution. And there's one in London during Victorian times, like the time of Sherlock Holmes. And then I think they've gone back. I haven't played them, but they've gone back to like ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. So I kind of like the way it ties history into, you know, just running around and doing crazy stuff.
Okay, well, I'm going to pick one that isn't shooting and fighting.
Okay.
I couldn't choose one, but if I think of one that I spent hours and hours and hours playing with my friends, it would be some of the early Pro Evo soccer games.
Oh, okay.
Used to be called ISS Pro. It's basically just a soccer game. You play one team, your friend plays the other team, and you just try and beat each other at a game of computer soccer. I played against my friends many hours, days, always arguing about who was cheating or who had the best players or who was doing something that was just slightly not right or so lucky, that kind of thing. Great amount of fun playing those kinds of football games at home on the computer.
And did you generally win the games, or did your friends win, or was it usually even?
It goes pretty even. None of us were that good, but none of us were that bad, so...
That's great. And the good thing about those games is that every year, every couple of years, they come out with a new one, so you can keep playing them forever.
Yeah, they're great fun to play.
Good one.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for now, but join us again tomorrow. We'll introduce another classic video game. See you then. Bye for now.
Take care.
Fun facts. A classic video game is turning 40 this year. Pac-Man was created in 1980 by Toru Iwatani of the Japanese video game company Namco. In the game, players earn points by guiding Pac-Man through a maze while he eats dots. The small yellow figure also must avoid his enemies, colorful ghosts named Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde. In 1980, most video arcade games were violent and appealed to boys and men. Namco came up with Pac-Man as a game that girls and women could enjoy too. Pac-Man's shape was inspired by a pizza that was missing a slice and looked like a mouth. Pac-Man's shape was also based on the written Japanese character for mouth, but Iwatani made it round and cute. Pac-Man's name came from the Japanese word Paku paku, the sound of a mouth opening and closing. People loved the fun of solving Pac-Man's maze. The game was a hit, and it still is today.
Vocabulary Review.
Figure. Cameron could see the figure of a man in the dark room, but didn't know who it was. Avoid. There's bad traffic on the highway. Let's take a different road so we can avoid it. Violent. Madeline won't let her kids watch violent movies because they have so much death and killing in them. Appeal. Lots of people enjoy Italian food, but it doesn't appeal very much to me. Character. Few people know the meaning of the character dung, but it's a common family name in Taiwan. Solve. Ginny was able to solve the difficult math problem with her father's help.
智慧小补帖
Maze. Arcade. Inspire.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作。活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net